Well, hello, Madam Secretary.
Hi, Maria. How are you?
Good. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me today.
My pleasure.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the RCV experience in Santa Fe. You had much to do about that, and also just about ranked choice voting in general.
Yeah.
So the first question I want to ask you is, you have recently publicly supported some electoral reforms, and not so recently ranked choice voting, but also open primaries,
Yes.
etc. And I wanted to ask you why you've been publicly supporting these reforms. What issues exist that you think that these reforms might help out resolve?
Sure. Well, before we started this little interview today, we were just chatting on the side about voter turnout here in New Mexico. And we saw a little bit of an increase in our participation in the primary election we had this year, which is exciting, but we have a long way to go till we can get to full and robust voter participation. So the reason that I support the reforms that I support, including ranked choice voting, is because I believe that it will help stimulate voter participation and voter turnout at the polls. I fundamentally believe that our democracy is best and our government is at its best when we have the most people possible, the most citizens participating in our electoral process. Ranked choice voting is one of the ways that I think we can increase participation because it is a much more voter-friendly way of conducting elections.
Mm-hmm. Did you see this happening in the ranked choice voting election in Santa Fe?
Yeah, I think we saw a pretty healthy turnout this time around, and it was funny because a lot of people thought because it was going to be a new system, a new way of doing things, it was going to be confusing to voters, that voters weren't going to want to turn out to the polls, and I think we actually saw the reverse. I mean, not only did folks come out and rank their choices and find it easy to do, but it really wasn't the impediment, it wasn't the scary fear that everybody had that it would be in terms of, depressing voter turnout. So I was really happy about that.
Thanks for your help, actually, in helping, the city, pushing the city a little bit to implement. That was very helpful.
Sure. Well, the city adopted the ordinance way back in, 2008? Yeah, and up to this point, no Secretary of State had given them the tools they need to do it, and I viewed that as my job. I was happy to do it, and I was really happy once the city kind of got over its internal hurdles to make it happen, and really happened so well, I thought.
Mm-hmm. What is your advice to municipalities that are considering switching to ranked choice voting at this point? The Local Election Act has enshrined ranked choice voting into law in some ways.
Right.
So now municipalities are looking into it, they're considering it. What would you tell them?
I would tell them to start looking at it right now. The Local Election Act will go into effect in 2019. That's when we'll have our first consolidated local election. We're obviously hopeful, and I know FairVote's been working to make this happen, that as many municipalities opt into the local election. So again, we can have full, robust participation. And so start thinking about it now. Start looking at it, doing your research. I know FairVote and other organizations have a lot of information out there. And the city of Santa Fe, now that they've gone through an election, is a great resource for any other municipalities considering this, because they can talk about the steps that they took to make it successful here. The education campaign that they did, which I think is absolutely critical in any municipality, and they can talk to our office about what they need to be thinking about, how to draft a resolution, how do they need to structure the election, things like that.
Is there anything that grates on your last nerve about misconceptions and misinformation that people talk about in terms of ranked choice voting?
Yeah, and I think we talked about it a little bit. I think there is a fear that because it's a new way of voting, a new system, that folks won't want to participate, that they'll be afraid of it. I don't think we give our voters enough credit. Our voters are intelligent, and maybe voting isn't the thing they think about every single day like I do when I come into my office. But ranked choice voting is really simple. It's really easy, and it's really intuitive. Once a voter comes in the door and they take a look at the ballot, they, even if they haven't gotten a ton of education, they're able to figure it out pretty easily. So I think, there's a lot of fear mongering that goes into it. Oh, it's going to be hard, it's going to be confusing. Another one that I hear a lot is we're going to end up with one of the least favored candidates, right? And it's so ironic because the system is actually set up such that a least favored candidate doesn't get elected, right? We have someone who has the consensus support of most of the community with ranked choice voting, which is its advantage.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've been following what the main election that happened this week, and the voters voted to keep ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
And the voter turnout was really high, much higher than expected for this election as well. So we'll see. Do you think that there's a chance that this is a trend that more states are going to be implementing ranked choice voting at the state level?
I think just the fact that Maine did it at the state level gives it a better chance. I think most states are really afraid to be the first ones to do anything, right? It's kind of like Santa Fe was afraid to be the first city in New Mexico because you don't know how it's going to go. There are fears that would maybe keep you from doing something. So now that Maine has done it, states around the country can look to Maine as a model and look at what worked well, what they would have done differently, and what they want to do differently moving forward. And they don't have to have that fear of being the first and maybe screwing something up. I mean, that's always the fear of election administrators, is we don't want to mess up an election. It's so important. So I think now that they've done it, I do think that there is a likelihood that we might see some other states start to follow suit.
In terms of what your office is able to provide to municipalities that are perhaps thinking about ranked choice voting, what can you offer in terms of technical support, in terms of any kind of assistance to cities that want to do this?
Well, as I mentioned before, we're starting to put a bit of a toolkit together for municipalities, A, who want to become part of the local election, and B, who want to adopt ranked choice voting. As you know, because you're very involved in that, the city of Las Cruces has now adopted an ordinance for ranked choice voting. So we are using the ordinance that they used in Las Cruces as a model to be able to provide to other municipalities. We are able, with my internal staff, to come sit down and talk with city clerks and city officials about exactly how this works, what type of voter education they need to do, and of course the voting machine company Dominion that actually will do the hands-on technical work of programming the machines and training the poll workers. We work directly with them, and so we will be able to work with them on a work plan to make sure that everyone who's actually implementing a ranked choice voting election has that on-the-ground technical support that they need.
You're a Santa Fe voter.
Yeah.
Can you share with me what your experience was on election day here in Santa Fe?
Well, I was really excited because, as you know, we went through a whole rigmarole, right, to actually get ranked choice voting implemented. And, I sort of waited a little bit. I'm normally like the first person to vote on, the first day of early voting. And I waited a little bit, and I, availed myself of the educational materials that the city provided, a really great website and a great handout, and read through them, made sure that I was fully aware and prepared, had made my decisions about how I wanted to rank my choices in the election. I went and voted at the Genoveva Chavez Community Center, which is right by my house. Walked in, there was no line whatsoever, walked right in during early voting, got my ballot right away, took it to the voting booth. It was, as I said, very easy and intuitive. I was probably in and out in less than 5 minutes. Very simple, very easy, no problems whatsoever, and I felt really good about it when I left.
And did you have in your district, did you have a ranked choice race also for your city council?
I did, yeah, I did. And so that was kind of fun that both for mayor and for city council I got to rank my choices. And I'm very happy to say that my number one choices in both races won, so,
Good job.
That was nice.
Did you rank them all?
I ranked them all, yeah,
All right.
yeah. I know, I think there's like there's some strategy, right, that candidates were saying, just rank me and don't rank anybody else or whatever, and that's fine, that's every person's right if that's how they wanted to approach it, but I decided, I'm going to actually make a decision about how I feel about these candidates, and I'm going to codify that on my ballot, and I felt like that was really empowering. I felt really good about that.
You looking forward to more ranked choice voting elections?
I am. I really just think the first one went so well. I was so impressed, and I was one of the people that was like, look, let's do this here in Santa Fe. Let's see how it goes. If it goes well, great. If it doesn't, we can reevaluate and decide if this is how we want to do things moving forward. But I thought it was really fantastic, and one of the comments that I hear over and over again from folks, and I experienced this too, was that the campaigns were so much more positive than they would have been had we had a typical election, first past the post, because if the goal is, if you don't want to rank me first, please rank me second, right? And we actually saw how that worked in practice when the results came out and when we were able to look at how the different rounds went. And I think everybody benefits from a more positive election and talking about what candidates can do for the community rather than, throwing shade on your opponent, right?
Well, I hope to see you running in a ranked choice election at the state level one of these days.
That would be so cool.
We'll
I
see
would
what
love
happens.
that. Yeah, time will tell, but so far so good, and I think we're moving forward here in New Mexico, and I think it's exciting.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thanks for your help and thanks for your time today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Maria.